Majestic flags made in noble colors open the curtain of history. They close the stone castle in which history will begin. The main character appears in a noble-colored dress. She has snow-white skin and ashen hair, and she elegantly holds a porcelain bowl. The princess suddenly opens her eyes and looks menacingly at her maids, thereby making them flinch in fear. The sight of the maids afraid of the main character amuses her, and she laughs loudly. One of the maids cannot stand the tense situation and drops an expensive cup on the ground. The main character approaches the maid and raises her head with a fan, noticing that the girl has only recently started working in the castle. The princess smiles affectionately at the maid, as if calming her down and forgiving her for the broken cup. However, the next moment, the face of the new maid ends up on the fragments of the cup. It was the main character who brutally hit her on the ground. The maid raises her head, waking up from the blow. Her face is all covered in cuts. There is now a lot of blood on the ground. The girl is in tears. Throwing away the fan, the main character leaves the maid, saying that she has a good appearance, but it does not correspond to her mental development. She again turns to face the girl and addresses her, calling her Aisha. Aisha covers her mouth with her hand in horror, and now the realization comes to her that her mistress knows her name. The main character grins and says that she hates it when bugs disturb her peace during afternoon tea. The maid cannot utter a sound. The words are stuck in her throat. The only thing she hears is the frantic beating of her heart. The heroine shows her nature. She shouts at the helpless maid, reproaching her for the fact that the tea was not the same temperature as her lips. The villainess specifically steps into the place where the maid's hand lies, piercing it, and blood begins to flow out of it non-stop. A cry of pain involuntarily escapes from Aisha's mouth. Tears instantly appear in her eyes. While the main character is shouting curses at the whole area, the maid Amelia is shaking with anger. At one point, Amelia pushes her princess, and her exquisite crown with emerald stones begins to fall off. The maid screams at the girl and wishes her death for the way she treats innocent palace workers. The main character falls to the ground, hitting her head. The clap made by a closed book interrupts the story told to us earlier. The action moves to a dance studio, where the dancers are discussing who will get the role of the villain for the final dance. Ella, a girl with a beautiful appearance, flowing ashen hair and a slender figure, becomes a volunteer. The dance director asks the girl about her decision, since previously she was supposed to play the main positive role. Ella is not going to refuse such a wonderful opportunity to test herself. The choreographer accepts the girl's decision to challenge herself and wishes her luck. The heroine reflects on her past, when she did only as her father wanted, and what she has achieved now, when she is trying to become a professional actress. The dancers leave the training room, but Ella decides to stay to practice some more. The girl is left alone. She rehearses the role of the tyrant, trying to express the emotions and intonations of the hero as believably as possible. Coming out of character, Ella sighs in disappointment, rubbing the back of her head. While the heroine is wondering what she needs to become a villain, a dark figure appears behind her. Before she finishes the last line from the script, Ella is pushed by a mysterious silhouette. The girl quickly falls from the chair on which she was rehearsing, and only at the last moment notices that this is not an accident. Ella sharply opens her eyes, inside of which it is as if one can see echoes of distant space and twinkling stars. Turning around, she angrily screams and asks who pushed her and almost killed her. However, instead of a dance studio and a mysterious offender, she finds herself in a beautiful garden, seeing only a couple of maids in front of her. Ella's eyebrows fly up, her eyes widen, and her mouth opens slightly in confusion as to how she ended up in this place. Aisha runs to the princess and grabs her by the hem of her dress, saying that everything that happened is her fault and asking for punishment. However, Amelia stops her and admits that it was she who pushed the mistress. The girl is ready to be executed for her offense. The princess, represented by Ella, stops the maid's confessions with a scream. Ella tries to figure out what's going on here, seeing how the maid is covering Aisha with herself, trying to protect her. The actress begins to understand something and looks around, studying the area and surroundings. The princess points her finger at the maids and repeats their names questioningly. Then the girl points her finger at herself and clarifies to the servants that she is a princess and is now in Atalanta. Ella begins to remember the plot of the book. which she was supposed to use to choreograph the dance. The girl remembers that the royal family died as a result of food poisoning that was spoiled by the servants. Ella finally realizes that she has been transported to the future. She is very frightened by the thought that she has found herself in a bloody old fairy tale. The actress's legs can no longer withstand the tension, and she sinks to the floor. Ella covers her eyes with her hand, realizing that this is the beginning of her hell. The heroine thinks about the plot of the story in which she finds herself, that the truth of the death of the kingdom of Adelante is covered in darkness, and no one knows the truth. The girl turns away from the servants, drawing her legs closer to herself and wondering whether she should fall again in order to return back to her world. Someone calls Her Highness, but his voice is so loud that even the cat jumps up in fright. The source of the scream turns out to be the palace guards who have come to save the princess. They cross their swords near the throats of the maids. The commander of the royal guard, Pilir, loudly shouts at the servants, threatening to kill them for attempting to kill a member of the royal family. Ella gets scared when she hears the commander's threat and screams for them not to kill the maids. Pilir is surprised by his mistress's reaction and asks whether he should carry out a more brutal execution by preparing the horses for quartering. The heroine feels bad thinking about how the horses will tear the servants to shreds. Still nauseous, Ella yells at the royal guards, ordering them to stop. The commander's gaze becomes harsher and more suspicious due to the princess's strange behavior. The girl understands that she behaves completely differently from the main character, and if everyone understands that she's a stranger, it could cost her life. Ella makes her look more indifferent and orders the guards to lock up the servants until she comes up with a more painful reprisal. Pilir enthusiastically claps the princess for her composure and the horror that she knows how to instill in people. The princess leaves, ordering the maids to be detained, but the commander asks her where she is going. A stern look is directed at the man. The princess irritably asks him if she should report to a lower person. Pilir bows to the princess, saying that he has exceeded his authority. Her Highness finally leaves with her head held high. The commander-in-chief raises his head and a wry grin appears on his face. Meanwhile, Ella rushes through the entire garden, trying to quickly leave the scene. The girl runs to a clearing and leans against a tree, trying to catch her breath. To breathe easier, the heroine takes off all her heavy jewelry and outerwear. Ella lies down on the black blanket, mistaking it for a picnic tablecloth, and finally enjoys the silence. Something twitches under the girl's head, but the heroine thinks that these are stones. The actress sighs and begins to think out loud about returning to her world, whether it is possible. Full of determination, the princess jumps up and exclaims that she must survive. Ella remembers the ending, in which both handmaids die that evening, and the entire royal family and she will be fatally poisoned. Looking at the sky, the girl realizes that she still has half a day left before nightfall, and during this time she needs to find the killer in order to survive. The princess lies back down, but this time she bumps into someone's lap, and a man towers over her. Ella sees in front of her a handsome man with emerald eyes and ashen hair. A blush appears on the girl's face from the attractive appearance of the man. The characters look at each other intently, one with surprise, the other with interest. The stranger asks the lady to get off his feet. Ella immediately jumps up and apologizes for disturbing her, to which the man asks for forgiveness for disturbing her sleep. The girl says that the ash-haired man should not worry, but inside she feels that she is about to die from the intelligence of the stranger. Finally, the princess realizes that the man was here all along and heard everything she said about the extermination of the royal family. It's as if something hits the heroine's head, and her eyes widen when the stranger confirms her fears. The ash-haired man distracts the girl from her thoughts by getting down on one knee in front of her. The man introduces himself as Alan and says that he wants to serve the lady. The man also mentions that he has excellent knowledge of local cuisine. The girl freezes at Alan's words and tries to understand what just happened. The heroes find themselves inside the palace. Ella covers her face with her hand, thinking that beauty is misleading. The princess was so lost in her thoughts that she did not notice how Alan stopped and therefore crashed into his back. Rubbing her nose from the hard blow, Ella apologizes for her carelessness. The man turns to the princess and, smiling, says that it is an honor for him to touch her at least for a short time. At the man's words, the heroine's face flushes again with embarrassment. Alan leads the girl to the door leading to the kitchen. The door opens sharply and a body flies out of it, and in the doorway itself stands a silhouette holding a cane. The silhouette turns out to be a man dressed in a chef's suit, his face distorted with anger. The chef hits the boy with his cane for his poor cooking skills and asks if he is really ready to serve this to his royal family. Ella thinks in a whisper about the chef's words and looks for subtext in them, since in his statement he compared the food of pigs and the authorities. The girl turns to Alan to get his opinion on the situation, but he is not in his previous place. The heroine turns back as soon as she hears the voice of a boy trying to defend himself from the cook's attacks. The man is not happy that he will be contradicted and therefore swings at the child, intending to beat him with his cane. The boy's face contorts with anger, but he does not close his amber eyes, showing courage before striking. The cane, which recently flew at the boy, flies out of the cook's hands. Ella covers the child with her back. The man's eyes widen. The main character's name comes out of his mouth, but he doesn't have time to finish it. The girl grabs the boy's hand and tells him to run away from here with her. The young chef's eyes are no longer filled with anger. They reflect loss. Looking at the savior, the image of some girl named Liliana pops up in the blonde man's memory. From the memories of the girl, the boy's legs give way and he falls. Without getting up, the boy raises his head and now he has only one word in his thoughts: little sister. The cook was still standing in the same place where the heroes left him and was trying to figure out whether Princess Ella was the boy's savior. Someone appears behind the man and asks if he is surprised by Her Highness's behavior. Startled, the cook turns sharply to the source of the voice. The kitchen manager tries to hit the intruder with his wooden leg, but he parries the blow with his sword. The chef's name is Papati. He served in the past and is a former lieutenant general, and the stranger turns out to be Alan. Smiling, Alan asks the chef why he is angry and whether the wine he brought last time is to blame for this mood. After the ash-haired man's words, the taste of that wine that he would be glad to quickly forget appears on the cook's tongue. The boss shouts at Alan not to remind him of that black liquid anymore. The man, in turn, says that he apparently mixed up the bottles. Alan smiles again and says that the drink was made from medicinal herbs and was good for the former lieutenant general's wounds. Papati starts shouting even louder at the ash-haired man and says that he wants regular wine. With a chuckle, the cook turns away from Alan and asks why he is here, also warning that he will no longer give crystal apples for offering. The cook safely hid the apples in the safe so that no one else but him could use them. The memory of the taste of apples makes Papati salivate and laughs mischievously. Alan grins at the cook's reaction and says that he came not for the apples, but because he had something more attractive. The men turn their heads in the direction where the princess recently ran away. Papati breaks into a smile, and his gaze becomes more cunning. He asks if the guy saw what just happened. The chef thoughtfully says that the princess is behaving unusually today, and the ash-haired man tells him that it is because of him that she got lost. At Alan's words, the man turns sharply towards him. The guy, in turn, smiles innocently. Papati exclaims enthusiastically that Alan is meeting with Her Highness, and the ash-haired man asks him to be quieter. A sly smile spreads across the guy's face. He says that the most interesting things are yet to come. Meanwhile, Ella sits next to the crying child, not knowing what to do. The girl does not understand how to calm the boy, who is crying incessantly. When the princess tries to say something to the boy, he only begins to shed more tears. The boy's tears flow without stopping. Ella begins to panic, not understanding what to do. At some point, the girl accepted her helplessness next to the child, feeling that she would also cry. After 10 minutes, the child finally calms down and apologizes for his behavior. The actress turns her head towards the child and clarifies whether he has definitely finished crying. The child is embarrassed, either because of his behavior or because of the girl's beauty. Ella gets up from the floor and tells the boy, since he has calmed down, she will go. The fair-haired one thanks her. However, the boy's hand pulls the bottom of the princess's shirt, asking her to stop. Ella turns around in surprise and looks at the child. The boy, like a puppy, asks the girl to stay with him for a while longer, since she resembles his sister. The princess agrees to stay, but only on the condition that the fair-haired man stops crying. The characters sit next to each other on the floor in complete silence. A slight awkwardness is felt. Ella contemplates returning to the place they fled from, since the boy is working in the kitchen. The The blonde interrupts the princess's train of thought and asks if she is a servant here, like him. The child claims that she is definitely a servant, since everything was taken away from her, just like him. But he reassures Ella, because soon everything will be over. The actress asks the boy what he means. He says that we are talking about the royal family, which is cruel to the people. The boy smiles evilly, saying that soon the royal family will finally disappear. The princess feels uneasy at the idea that she could soon become a corpse. In her heart, she wants to shake information out of the boy. The maid arrives to defuse the situation. She invites Her Highness to dinner with the king. When the boy heard the servants name the girl, he realized that all this time he had been informally communicating with Princess Ella. Blonde stutters as he pronounces Ella's title. She realizes that her secret has been revealed. The princess tries to reassure the young cook, saying that some mistake has occurred and extends her hand to him. The boy is very angry and therefore throws her hand away from him. The child yells at Ella and blames her for everything, wishing the royal family dead. Ella tries to calm the boy down and stop him, but he doesn't listen to her and runs away. The maid hurries the princess to the king, noticing that she is walking around in only a nightgown. The action moves to the dining room, where the entire royal family has gathered. Eldest Prince Mo Tyler notices that in addition to the royal family, a sage is present at the dinner. The sage replies that he is present here at the invitation of His Majesty, and it is an honor for him to sit at the same table with him. Princess Ella arrives in the hall. Smiling, she apologizes to her father for being late. His Majesty accepts the apology and invites the princess to quickly sit down at the table. Ella raises her concentrated gaze and looks at her father. The girl remembers that King Hiram Adelante always pampers his princess very much, and he also has 4 sons. This time, Ella looks from her father to the invited guest. The heroine sees a man sitting in an elegant outfit and with a mask that hides half of his face. The older brother asks Ella if she is as surprised as he is that a wise man has decided to attend their family dinner. At the same moment, the princess remembers that it was the sage Savel who led the rebels and decided to execute Ella by hanging her. The heroine is horrified by thoughts of execution and once again decides that she must survive. Ella looks with concern at the man sitting at the table with a predatory smile. Tyler tries to pull the girl out of her thoughts by waving his hand in front of her. However, the princess cannot take her eyes off the sage veil. The man suddenly gets up from the table. From such actions of a man, the heroine takes a defensive stance and turns to Vale, loudly asking what he is up to. Tyler gets angry at his sister and angrily tells her that the princess can't behave like that. The sage laughs cheerfully, saying that the princess apparently is not happy with him. Ella shudders and begins to deny the man's words. The sage quickly walks towards the heroine, which makes her very scared. The man takes Her Highness by the chin and gently pulls her towards him. The king calls the sage by name and asks him not to take the young girl's words too seriously. Savel seems to envelop him and the princess with his predatory aura, making the girl feel helpless. The sage turns slightly to His Majesty and tells him not to worry about it. From such a heavy aura, sweat appears on the king's face, and his eyes widen in fear. However, in the next moment, fear gives way to humility, and Hiram Adelante averts his gaze. The first prince is angry at the sage's behavior, the third only chuckles, the second trembles in fear, but the fourth does not react at all. His Majesty, drooping, agrees for Vale to speak with the princess. The sage turns to Ella and asks her if the rumors are true. The man squeezes the girl's cheeks too much that she begins to speak stammeringly and asks what rumors she's talking about. Vale closes the distance between the heroes and says that we are talking about the princess falling in love with him. Without hesitation, the girl gives a strong slap to the man. Ella hit the sage so hard that he even started bleeding. There was deathly silence in the hall. All the brothers tensed in anticipation of what would happen next. Even the youngest stopped reading the book. Vale grins at the princess's action and wipes the blood from her lips. The heroine looks at the man with contempt, caustically pronouncing his name and demands that he leave. Otherwise, the kingdom will declare war on Adelam. Concentrated, looking at the princess, he sees how she quickly changed from a frightened lamb into a proud lioness. Smiling slyly, the sage exhales and licks the blood from his lower lip with his tongue. Savel bows gracefully to Ella, but at the same time tries to intimidate her by enveloping her in his snake aura. The man's eyes turn into the eyes of a mad predator who is ready to attack his prey at any moment. The sage leans towards the girl and points out the tone she should not use towards him. Ignoring Vale's words, the heroine silently walks forward, leaving the man behind her. The sage heads out of the dining room, shouting that since the princess does not want to see him, then so be it. The king breathes a sigh of relief after Sawoil leaves. Hiram says his daughter's name, wanting to discuss what happened, but Ella interrupts him. The princess looks at the king like a child, saying that he again forgot to ask to remove the green pepper from the food. The man is speechless at how quickly his daughter has transformed. Tyler sneers at His Majesty, saying that he is amazed that the king has the courage to rule the country. The third brother, Ka Liam, retorts to the older brother that he is competing with the woman for the king's blessing, and the brothers begin to argue. The king is annoyed by the brothers' bickering and demands that they stop, saying that Ella is young and should be taken care of by her family. Ella stops His Majesty, hitting the table with her hand. The girl tells her father that she is finished and will go, but he is worried that she has not eaten anything. When the heroine leaves, the king scolds the brothers for quarreling at the table and says that since Ella has not eaten, it may affect her health. Moving away from the dining room, the heroine sinks to the floor. Tears come from her eyes. She is scared. On the way to her room, Ella's head was constantly spinning due to the stress she had experienced. Approaching the bed, the actress's body barely moved, and it constantly intended to fall. Finally, the girl falls on the bed, burying her face in the pillow, and says that she was very scared of the man in the mask. Ella remembers how she felt in front of the sage. It seemed to her that she was a mouse caught in a beast's mousetrap. The girl opens her eyes after remembering Sawile, now worried that he suspected something. However, after the terrible memories, the heroine has a picture in her head when the sage came very close to her face. The princess hits herself on the cheek, forcing her to come to her senses from such thoughts. Then Ella convinces herself that since he is from the distant past, he cannot know about the movements and it was just a provocation. Lying in bed, the girl thinks about what happened, about her father, brothers, and whether next time she will be able to deceive the sage. Waving her arms and legs, Ella is angry that there was too little description of the royal family in the book. Having calmed down, the heroine gets out of bed, using her flexibility and grace. The princess decides that let everything take its course, but she cannot know for sure whether she will survive or not, and goes to inspect the entire palace. Full of strength and energy again, Ella goes to explore the palace. The door to the kitchen opens slightly and someone walks in. The stranger approaches the products from which dishes are prepared for the royal family and sprinkles them with some kind of poison. However, upon hearing a voice warning him not to do this, the culprit drops the bag of poison. The intruder turns out to be the same boy whom the cook wanted to beat. His amber eyes look fearfully at the newcomer. Ella stands in the doorway and looks at the child, saying that she knows that he is a good person, and the role of a criminal does not suit him. The boy only gets angrier at the princess's words and says that he wants to poison the royal family because he belongs in hell, just like him. Ella stops the young cook and says that if he did this often, he would know that he needs to add poison to the prepared food. The boy brushes off the heroine, saying that she is laughing at him. The princess stops him and asks him to tell him what bad she did for him, and then she will try to prove that she has changed. The child looks at her with an arrogant look, saying that a commoner does not dare talk to the nobility. Ella stops the boy again, but this time she covers his mouth with both hands. The princess smiles friendly at the young man and mentions his sister, as he previously spoke about their similarity. The image of his sister instantly pops up in the boy's head. Tears come out of the young chef's eyes when he remembers Liliana. The boy's body weakened. The strength in his hands disappeared. Ella no longer held him. The young man's legs weaken, and he falls onto the hard floor with a loud sound. The boy's eyes quickly fill with tears, and he silently apologizes to his sister for the fact that no one could save her. Sometime in the past, the commander of the royal guard came to the boy's house, demanding that his father pay taxes on behalf of the princess. On that fateful day, the mother did her best to protect her child, holding him to her chest. However, the boy still clearly remembered how Pilir hit his father's jaw with his knee, ordering the guards to make a slave out of his son. The guard grabs the child and drags him away from the house. The boy extends his hand forward in the hope that his parents will save him. The blond man's arms were spread apart and secured with belts. His head was also fixed, and a red-hot seal rose above the child. Clutching the piece of wood between his teeth, the future slave screamed in extreme pain. The young chef lifts the hair at the back of his head to show off his scar. The boy says that because of her, he was branded and made a slave, and the same thing awaits his family in the future. The young man looks at Ella with all the pain, hatred, and resentment that have been accumulating all this time. The mark in the form of a sea reptile is the sign of the slaves of Adelante. Slaves are the legal property of their owner, and their owners can do whatever they want with them. The princess approaches the fair-haired one, extending her hand to his scar. Seeing that the boy is scared but does not move away, the girl decides to touch the brand with her fingertips. Amber eyes look fearfully and warily at the heroine. Ella reflects that an innocent child has become a slave against his will, and she sadly asks if he is in pain. Instantly, the heroine realizes that she said something stupid, and it was, of course, very painful for him. The boy, gritting his teeth, boils his head off her. The princess apologizes and says that she knows that she cannot earn forgiveness. With a worried look, the girl looks at the back of the boy's head and asks to give her a chance to atone. The young man's hair covers his eyes, from which bitter tears flow. Without waiting for the boy's answer, Ella lifts him up the way a mother cat lifts her kittens by the scruff of the neck. The princess says that even if the blonde one answers her no, she still has to do something, and they leave the kitchen together. Alana, who was watching this picture from the side, smiles as she looks at them. The man wonders how many more surprises the heroine will present. At the construction site of the Colosseum, a fat master beats his slave, demanding that he get up from the ground and continue working. His wife runs up to the slave and asks the owner to stop beating him with the whip, since he is sick. The man says that it would be better for the slave to die and not spend the princess's money on providing for them, and orders the woman to leave. However, the wife does not leave her husband and covers him with her back, waiting for the blow. The whip does not have time to hit the woman, as someone's bracelet gets caught in the handle of the whip. The whip falls from the owner's hands to the ground, causing him to freeze in shock. The gentleman turns in the direction from which the decoration came, threateningly asking who is tired of living in this world. Frowning her eyebrows, the princess says that it looks like the man doesn't value life if he talks to her like that. The young cook runs up to the woman who recently defended her husband, calling her mom, and she calls him by his name, Jack. Jack, with tears in his eyes, tells his mother not to worry anymore, because now they have a chance to survive. Mother and son look hopefully at the princess, in front of whom the slave master is kneeling. The heroine scolds the man, saying that since he spoke to her so impudently, he is ready to accept the consequences. A man on his knees beats his head on the ground, begging for mercy. The girl chuckles, seeing his pathetic behavior. The princess looks away and notices the slaves who are looking at her with curiosity. Ella notices that all the slaves are so thin that their bones are visible. The princess's fists clench tightly at such a sight. Realizing who makes people look like this, the heroine hits the man on the head with her heel. Ella notices a sword next to her. Pulling it out, the girl points the tip towards the owner of the slaves, saying that for his cruelty, he must be executed at least 100 times. Ella swings her sword. Such actions of the princess make the man very afraid, causing his face to become covered with drops of sweat. A stream flowing along the ground appears between the man's legs. However, Ella did not want to chop the master of the slaves into pieces. She swung her hand to cut the woman's chain, but the chain did not break. The edge of the sword turned out to be not sharp enough for this. After an unsuccessful attempt, Her Highness throws away the sword, saying that it is as worthless as its owner. In her heart, the princess laughs out of awkwardness, because in the movies it seemed easier to do, and she didn't think that her arm would hurt so much. Holding her sore hand, Ella orders the guards to remove the shackles from the slaves. Jack's mother looks hopefully at the guardsman and asks him if they can leave now, but the guy does not dare answer. Then the heroine decisively says that the slaves are free and can now return home and live happily. The boy looks at the princess in disbelief after her words about their freedom. Jack falls to his knees, as does his mother, who bows to the floor to the girl for their release. The woman grabs her son's hands, saying that now they can return home, but he still cannot move away from Her Highness's words. The princess smiles contentedly as she finally sees a happy picture. However, when the girl turns around, she sees the predatory glances of the slaves directed at her. Hoping to be freed, the girl with light purple hair falls in front of the heroine, saying that she will do anything for her. The slaves simultaneously fall to their knees in a deep bow, begging the princess to remove their shackles too. Ella looks with pity at all the slaves who so desperately want to gain freedom. The girl remembers how she used to admire the grandeur of ancient buildings, but in fact, behind them, there is only the suffering of people. The actress really wants to tell them that they are all free, but she cannot, because she understands that they have nowhere to go. The princess understands that if she gives them the land, the nobles will take it back by force. Ella is angry because she doesn't know what the right thing to do in this situation is right. However, the girl turns around and realizes that she is in the Colosseum, and a solution to the problem comes to her. The heroine approaches a girl with purple hair and asks her if she can dance. She answers positively. Ella smiles happily because she understands that then she will be able to implement the idea. In His Majesty's office, Ella's elder brother conveys to the king that his sister's actions are a disgrace to their family. The father is angry at his son's words, and he says that since his daughter did this, it means it was necessary. Tyler sits down on the couch, disappointed and angry. However, after a second, a sly smile appears on his face. The youngest brother, Ha Terrence, notices this, but decides not to interfere and continues reading the book. Alan lies carefree on the grass in the garden with a book on his face. Next to him, a servant on his knee reports news about Princess Ella. Hearing the news that Ella is going to make a theater instead of the Colosseum, the man puts the book away. Together with the servants, the heroine returns to the slaves. People greet Ella in silence, frozen in anticipation. Jack goes to Her Highness and says that, as she asked, he gathered all the slaves, but asks why she needs this. Instead of answering, the girl claps her hands, calling the servants. The servants hand the slaves trays of cloth and a chest. The heroine entrusts these people with the reconstruction of this place and says that she has high hopes for them. Jack's family and he himself exclaim in surprise. The girl distributes tasks to the husband and wife so that they can monitor the work of the men and women. Ella smiles and thinks for a couple of seconds about who to make manager. The princess approaches Jack, puts her hands on his shoulders, and entrusts him with the management of the theater. Waking up after the heroine's words, the young man begins to wave his arms, saying that he doesn't know how to do anything and therefore won't be able to lead. Ella puts her index finger to his lips, silencing him. The heroine looks at him worriedly, asking if he wants to continue to suffer in hard labor. The boy retreats, taking a step back, after the princess's words. The girl makes a serious look and tells Jack that in this life only he can help himself. The boy has a memory of the day when he was separated from his family. He doesn't want to suffer anymore, and for this he needs to be strong. Tearful but filled with confidence, Jack shouts that he will become stronger. Ella is amazed at the young man's bold answer. The girl smiles and praises the boy and strokes his head. The princess claps and asks for a moment of attention. The heroine announces that from now on, people are no longer slaves, and the theater is their salvation, and the more successful it is, the more they will be paid. The princess says that they can stay and participate in the creation of the theater, and if they don't want to, then they are free. When everyone is left, Ella smiles happily, and meanwhile, Jack reflects that he almost killed their savior. The boy clenches his hands into fists. He feels that he wants to thank and protect the princess for everything she has done for him. The young man shouts to the girl that he will not disappoint her. The freedmen work hard to create a stage for the plays. The women, in turn, sew costumes for the actors. Faye, a girl with purple hair, is entrusted by the princess with training dancers. The next day, Jack runs up to Ella and tells her that the costumes are ready. The heroine is glad that the women were able to complete the task so quickly and invites the young man to look at the costumes together. Metal pipes smash the scenery into splinters. Jack tells the trespassers to stop destroying everything. From the sidelines, the second son of the Marquis, Leon Fond, is watching what is happening with a smug smile. Jack's father falls at his feet, clinging to his clothes, and asks him to stop and discuss everything. The second heir of the Marquis kicks Jack's father in the chest. The son runs up to the man, presses his legs to his stomach, trying to relieve the pain from the push. Angry at Leon, the boy takes a pipe from the ground and angrily swings at him. However, Jack is hit from behind by one of the servants of the Marquis's son. The second servant pierces the boy's leg with an arrow. The young man's face is lifted by the chin, showing it to Leon, who calls him Princess Ella's favorite. Jack tears out his face and angrily shouts at the blonde that he has no right to insult Her Highness. For the boy's words, he is kicked in the face with a boot. Leon throws up his hands and says that he didn't say anything like that, because Ella disgraced her family, and now everything belongs to him. The man holds a golden dagger to the blonde man's throat and says that he will spare his life if he insults the princess. Jack says something, but it comes out slurred due to his swollen cheek. To hear the boy's words, the second son approaches his face. The next moment, Jack spits in Leon's face. The man slams the young man's face into the ground and threatens to cut off his head for spitting. The servant is already begging the pipe over the boy's head to break it. However, the actions of the subordinate are stopped by the arriving princess. She is dressed in an exquisite orange dress, but without shoes. The girl approaches Jack, who is lying on the ground. Seeing the young man's condition, Ella orders a doctor to be brought to him. However, no one dares to move and carry out the order of Her Highness. The worried mother runs up to her child. The princess tells her to take the boy away and find a doctor. Leon looks at the heroine's outfit and asks her if the theater is a cover for lewdness. Hearing this, Ella turns to face the man and says not to devalue other people's work. The girl tells the Marquis's son that he only knows how to spend his parents' money and that he is only good for consuming food. Leon is very angry because of Ella's words, saying that she is only pretending to be kind and merciful. The man continues to escalate the situation and says that even the king is unhappy with her actions. The second son shouts to the slaves that if something happens, everything will be fine with the princess, but they will suffer. Frowning her eyebrows, the princess says that she knows about the king's opinion. Leon narrows his eyes and is glad that the third prince did not lie, that Ella lost the king's support. At the same moment, the king's messenger appears and announces that in the princess's land, she has absolute power. The heroine looks triumphantly at the Marquis's son and says that although his father is not happy, he remains on her side. The action moves to a day ago, when Ella came to her father's office so that he would sign permission to implement her idea. The sage and Tyler enter the room. The king tells his daughter to take a walk in the garden, since he is currently busy with documents. The princess puffs out her cheeks at her father's words. The girl snatches the paper from His Majesty's hands. The heroine says that her question is no less important, and therefore she will not leave until the king helps her. The older brother yells at his sister that she is distracting her father over little things and interfering with his work. Ella turns her head to her father, seeking support. However, she sees his head drooping and turned away from her. The princess returns the document to the table and remembers that the king is a coward and selfish by nature and will not be able to go against the nobility. The girl directs her gaze to the sage. Ella recalls that the nobility of Atalanta are divided into aristocrats with titles for merit and into successors of the ancestral line. These two groups are like fire and water and cannot get along with each other. The girl decides to cheat and turns her attention to the sage, telling her father to ask him about her seriousness. Savale raised an eyebrow in surprise. Ella puts on a nervous smile, and her body continues to tremble. The king turns a surprised glance at the sage, asking whether he knew the princess's plans. Vale asks the princess if he should know about her plans. The heroine excitedly says that since the sage always advocates for the prosperity of the country, they are in the same boat. Looking at her father, Ella says that the theater will solve the problem with the uprisings of the people, since they will have something to occupy themselves with. With confidence in her eyes, she asks what the sage thinks about her idea. Tyler looks at his father and sees that he has actually thought about his sister's words. Frowning, the first prince shouts at Ella not to mislead the king. However, Tyler is interrupted by the sage, who says that the princess's words have meaning. Sawile's words cause the king and prince to cry out in surprise. Ella looks at the sage in disbelief, glad that he agreed. The man sits down on the sofa and says that with the stick method, it is necessary to give the carrot. Vale says that with the right decision, the king will begin to be valued more, and this is a much more effective method than violence and threats. Tyler shouts that this is a lie and commoners are not worth such effort. The sister interrupts her brother and says that then the king's tactics are lies, since respect is gained through paying him money. His Majesty stops family disputes. Rubbing the bridge of his nose, the man accepts the sage's wish and therefore approves of his daughter's idea. The father tells his son that there is still room in the eastern part of the city, so he can do it his way. Not understanding what is being said, the girl turns her gaze to the sage, fearing that he is angry with her, since now he is involved in this matter. However, Sawoil only smiles mysteriously at the princess. Ella turns back to her father, starting a conversation about his approval. The king gently stops the heroine, placing his hand on hers, and says that her daughter left her no choice, and the sage will take care of the organization. Glowing with happiness, the princess thanks her father and says that she will run to get ready. When Ella passes by Sawoil, he barely audibly tells her that she now owes him. Without answering the sage, the girl leaves. Standing in the Colosseum, the girl thinks that if the man wants to get even, the soldiers will come to her. Leon says that the people the third prince sent here 2 days ago did not warn him about the king's decree. Ella looks at the man in surprise because of his words about Liam. A messenger approaches the second son of the Marquis and asks him to follow him, since he illegally caused problems for the princess. Leon is nervous and says that he acted on behalf of the third prince, since he promised to make him duke after the coronation. The king's man silences the Marquis's son by stuffing a handkerchief into his mouth. The man begins to list Leon Fonda's crimes and orders him to be taken to stand trial. Having finished his work, the messenger announces that they are leaving. The princess looks happily and gratefully at the king's men leaving. Fea joyfully jumps on the girl, saying that this is simply wonderful news. All the people begin to rejoice and praise Princess Ella. The heroine turns to the people and says that now they can continue working with peace of mind. There are 15 days left before the theater opens. A worried maid runs up to the princess, saying that the beam on which the rope hangs is bent in the middle. Ella clarifies whether they have installed auxiliary supports. The servant answers in the affirmative, but the princess understands that the matter is in the laws of physics. When 10 days remain, the heroine examines the finished costumes for the actors, but her hands begin to shake from the sight of them. One of the seamstresses says that they decided to save a little on materials, since it is the princess's money. Ella is horrified by the sight of the bear's lower part, which should have been voluminous. There are 8 days left before the opening, and the heroine notices that many girls are embarrassed to put on dresses, remaining in their shirts. However, the princess does not allow them to be left, throwing her away. With only 3 days left, she finally sees Jack walking towards her with leaflets in his hands. Ella saw a lot of strange things during the days of preparation, so she thinks that she will not be surprised if she sees coat-tops on the sheets. However, her fears are not confirmed, and she joyfully looks at the young man. There are 4 hours left before the opening. Leaflets announcing the opening of the theater are falling from the sky on the streets of the city. An actor in a bear costume invites everyone to the first performance. Since tickets to the performance are very cheap, many children decide to go to it. Ella's older brother's spy is looking at the crowd of people from around the corner, and he says that he will do everything to ensure that no one gets to the performance. However, someone taps the spy on the shoulder, forcing him to turn around. The next second, the man is lying on the ground. The commander of the nightly detachment stretches his left hand, with which he has just eliminated a criminal, and orders him to be taken away for interrogation. The commander, Corporal Lars, informs his knights that his shift is coming to an end and tells them to continue patrolling the streets without him. A knight with blonde hair asks the other's opinion on the reason for the commander's interest in the theater. Ella wore a tight, awkward smile. The girl sits in front of the sage, who decided to look at the princess. The heroine thinks that Vale decided to return the favor. Silence hangs between both. The man gets up from his chair and approaches the princess, hovering over her. Ella winces at the sage's gaze and satisfied smile. Sawoil asks the princess if she was the one who called the man. The girl clarifies whether she heard correctly that it was at her invitation that he was here. And then the girl realizes that someone familiar to her is standing in front of her. The day before, Ella was looking through documents to understand what was missing for the opening of the theater tomorrow. A maid comes to the princess, informing her that the debut act, consisting of 10 people, is ready to entertain the audience. After the maid's words, Her Highness leaves the room in a hurry. The maid can't keep up with the king's daughter and shouts after her that she hasn't even changed her clothes. Ella runs into the garden, very out of breath, and tells someone that he really came. Alan sits relaxed by a tree and, seeing the lady, rejoices at her arrival. Not listening to the man's advances, the girl approaches his face, asking if he knows about the theater. Sitting away from the heroine, he says that he heard a little about his discovery. Ella happily tells him that she is inviting him to the performance and asks him to bring one of his friends. Sighing, the ash-haired man asks why she's inviting him. The princess replies that this is because she has no more friends besides Alan, and she needs someone who will look after the rowdies. Alan chuckles awkwardly and says he doesn't seem to have a choice. The girl happily asks if the man agrees to go to the theater. The ash-haired one politely bows to the princess and says that he cannot refuse, only that his friend is not quite ordinary. Ella grabs the man's hand and says that it doesn't bother her because she needs a lot of spectators at the opening. The heroine does not take her eyes off Alan but does not utter a word. Narrowing his eyes, Alan asks Her Highness if he really isn't worthy of being her bodyguard. A luxurious carriage arrives on the red carpet. Jack, dressed in a black suit, bows respectfully to the arriving guests. The guests turn out to be the sage and all the princess's brothers, except the first prince. The spies of Ella's elder brother, lost in the crowd, say that Thaler needs to be reported about the arrival of the princes and the sage. The first honored guests of the theater begin to take their seats. The baron with the purchased title, Eliot, notices that the slaves have prepared ordinary wooden chairs for special guests. The third son of the king turns to the sage, offering to go to his palace instead of the performance, but he ignores Liam. Without waiting for any reaction, Liam sits down next to Savail. The guy thinks of the queen's glory, that the support of the sage is very important now, so he needs to establish a connection with him. Finally, the performance begins. The dancers take the stage, performing choreography on the drums. The audience looks at them in admiration, without taking their eyes off. The corporal shares his impressions with the king's envoy, saying that the images of identically dressed girls are beautiful. The prince and the commander of the knights are surprised how the actors manage to move like that. One of the girls with silver hair gracefully dances along with the musical instrument pipa. The sage looks only at the dancer with the pipa with his predatory gaze. A couple of hours before the performance, the man asked Ella if he was worthy of being a bodyguard. She replied that he could just come. Moving his body closer to the princess, he told her that they should trust each other. This time, when Ella looked into the sage's eyes, they were filled not with snake cunning, but with warmth. As he left, the man said that the heroine still owed one more debt. Alan smiles at the memory of that meeting. Next to the sage, the third prince says that the girl with silver hair will be his. However, the masked man interrupts the prince in a low voice, saying that the dancer will be his. Liam's gaze focuses on the girl's face, his eyebrows furrowed. The next moment, the prince jumps up from his seat and calls his sister questioningly. Ella looks at him worriedly, wondering why her brother came here. The princess begins to wonder if Alan brought the prince as his friend. Faya calls the heroine, reminding them that it's time for them to change clothes. The girl begins to worry that they won't be able to cope, as soldiers are coming. Jack looks at the princess worriedly, wondering what is bothering her. But one of the workers calls him, saying that they are looking for him. The boy comes to the place where someone was looking for him and looks around. The young man finds a note lying on the ground. Envoy Felix returns to his place. Jack, in turn, takes off after reading the note, which says that anything can happen. Ella happily sings and dances on stage with the rest of the girls. The third prince turns to the sage and says that the song makes no sense and specifies when they will leave the theater. Alan, without turning his head, says that the performance is not over yet. The man looks intently at the girl singing in the center, wondering how she will cope with the next threat this time. At one moment, everything freezes and Ella's eyes widen in fear. The girl begins to fall from the stage. The princess felt that it was not her legs that failed her, but a push in the back. The heroine turns around to see the culprit. She turns out to be a girl with orange hair from a backup dancer. However, Ella successfully lands in scattered rose petals. Silence reigns in the hall. The princess continues to sing, despite the feeling of anger she feels. People in the audience begin to whisper that this fall was written in the script and looked spectacular. Even the third prince believes these words. saying that it was stupid to include something so shocking in the program. Jack peeks around the corner covered in sweat, worried about Her Highness. Alan looks somewhere to the side, saying that it is not time to relax yet. The top of the stage begins to crack. Backstage, Ella approaches the redhead asking where she is going, to which the girl replies that she doesn't feel well. Smiling kindly, the princess tells her to return quickly because without her, it will not be possible to continue the performance. The girl bows to her and exhales to herself, rejoicing that Her Highness did not notice. The heroine stops her by asking if she likes the jewelry and says that she can take anything from her father's treasury for her labor. The excited girl happily asks if she can take the gemstone necklace. The princess agrees and asks what it looks like. The redhead describes it in detail. The heroine's gaze becomes serious, and she directly asks why she needs this necklace. The dancer begins to make excuses and says that this necklace belongs to her. Ella doesn't believe her and asks how this necklace could belong to a former slave. The redhead nervously replies that she found him. The princess realizes that she is not telling her. The main character orders the employees to capture and lock up the criminal. The former slave sneers at her, saying that she won't be able to lock her up. However, the heroine answers her with the same look and asks if she really thinks that she will buy her provocation. Jack approaches them and tells the redhead that the princess prepared in advance because she knew how many enemies she had made for herself. The young man says that Her Highness predicted a long time ago that something might happen to the props. After the incident, the traitor is taken away, and the girls finish the performance. Ella enters the room and sees that they are waiting for her. The sage calls the girl his princess while sitting elegantly on a chair. The main character quickly enters the room and closes the door. The man sighs and says that, apparently, the princess had long ago guessed about his coming. The princess curtsies and says in an official tone that she is grateful for the sage's help. The masked man does not like Ella's actions. He says that Her Highness can leave the formalities. Alan grabs the girl's hands and pulls her towards him. The sage says that he can accept a joint dinner as gratitude. Ella is embarrassed and angry at the hero's actions. The girl looks into the man's eyes, and they seem somehow familiar to her. Alan pulls the princess closer to him, asking what she wants. The main character becomes too embarrassed, so she quickly moves away from the man. The man also gets up and, passing by, whispers in Ella's ear that they will meet in the evening. The sage stands contentedly outside the door and listens to the princess's curses. Felix tells his master about his nasty interest in Her Highness. Alan doesn't let Felix finish his sentence. Walking behind the gentleman, the guy asks if the princess will come tonight, to which he answers in the affirmative. Hearing how the princess still scolds the sage, the servant begins to doubt it. Someone starts knocking on the door as the princess tries to move away from her encounter with the snake. Jack starts knocking harder on the door and says that the theater is on fire. These words pull Ella out of her thoughts. The heroine looks at the burning scene with a menacing gaze. Jack's father runs up to the girl, offering to leave the extinguishing on them. Ella interrupts him, asking about the state of the firefighting installations. The man says that they are in good condition and the fire will be put out quickly. Moats of water are installed in the floor of the theater to effectively combat fire. Faya approaches the princess with the red-haired girl and says that she wanted to take advantage of the turmoil and escape. Ella turns to them and addresses the criminal, asking who sent her. The girl zealously says that the master will soon save her and that the theater will fall apart sooner or later. The princess, hearing the words about the master, asks the red-haired woman if they are talking about Mo Tyler. The intruder freezes and asks how Her Highness knows about this. Ella says that her brother wants to take over this land, but the theater is preventing him from doing this, so she has no one else to think about. In the evening, the princess is gathered for dinner with the sage. The maid asks to wear her cloak, since going out without it is considered bad manners. The main character gets angry and says that she won't go anywhere. The maid tries to convince her mistress, but she flatly refuses to listen to her. Ella leaves, saying that she has more important things to do in the garden. However, someone grabs her skirt, thereby stopping her. The princess gets angry at this behavior and shouts at the stranger. Another maid finds herself on her knees, begging her to accept the sage's invitation. She begins to cry out of hopelessness. The servant stands behind the prince and tells him that the theater is closed for renovations, and they also need to quickly finish with the dungeon. Tyler tells the servant to inform him about the work in the dungeon when they return. He will sort it out. Ella remembers two maids, Aisha and Emily, who are also important characters in the story. The princess, smiling awkwardly, tells Aisha that if she has something to say, let her say it and not cry. The girl is lifted from the floor by the blonde maid. Aisha tells the mistress to visit Mr. Lark Nuo. Her Highness asks the girl who he is. With tears in her eyes, the maid says that this wonderful man saved many people, including her sisters, from bad people. The girl says that she will do everything for her consent. Ella begins to think about her words, because devotion to an idol is a common occurrence. The princess asks what happened to Lark Nuo. After her Highness's question, the maids look at each other awkwardly. Aisha carefully begins to remind the princess that it was she who sent the man to prison for insulting the royal family. In her thoughts, Ella clutches her head, scolding the former owner of the body for her excessive cruelty. Smiling peacefully, the girl says that since he is such a good person, there was some kind of misunderstanding. Aisha tells the princess that she cannot wait, since Larka is to be hanged that very day. Ella stands in shock at the maid's words, realizing that it will be difficult to save the man. The figure of the maid Emily appears between the castle towers. The girl, seeing her friend, shouts at her why it took her so long to get to their meeting place. However, Aisha comes out from around the corner not alone, but together with her Highness. Emily raises her voice again, asking the maid what the princess is doing here. Aisha says that she brought her. The maid begins to accuse the heroine of the fact that it is because of her that the defender of Adelante is on the verge of death. The princess begins to remember something after hearing the maid call the man. The book said that one of the options for the fall of Adelante is due to the fact that the people lost their protector. The girl understands that she needs to free Lark Nuo right now in order to avoid her death. Ella reminds the maids to hurry if they still want to free the man. Shaking with anger, Emily nevertheless decides to take the mistress to the prisoner and tells him to follow her. The princess passes by the prisoners, wondering how they can live in these terrible conditions. Aisha runs up to Mr. Lark's cell and calls him. Lark Nuo is a former royal general of Adelante. Ella looks at the man's condition and assumes that he was tortured. The maid tells Lark that she asked the princess to have mercy on him. The man's hateful gaze turns to her Highness. Feeling how much the prisoner despises the girl makes her shudder. Closing his eyes, Lark laughs and says that he doesn't need the princess's mercy, so she can leave. Ella annoyedly replies that she is helping from the bottom of her heart, to which the man reminds him that he is here because of the cowardice of one of his subordinates. In her thoughts, the girl is again angry with the princess for the reason for the imprisonment of the former royal general. The maids turn their heads towards the princess, looking at her with hatred. Ella loudly asks the man to stop being poor and says to quickly leave here with them. At this noise, the elder brother and his servant come. The princess looks at the prince irritably and reflects that since he came here in person, the matter is now becoming more complicated. They start to take Lark away, but the girl stops him, saying that it was she who imprisoned the man and that she is in charge of his life. The brother mockingly looks at his sister, saying that now she has decided to free the one who has been sentenced to death. Tyler comes closer to the princess and says that such behavior is not her style. Ella looks away and realizes that she has really stepped out of character, but realizing that she is still in the body of the princess and retorts to the prince that this does not concern him, demanding that his man move away. Tyler tries to put pressure on Ella with his menacing gaze. The elder brother tells his sister to continue working on her theater. The servant hands him a scroll. The man unfolds it and reads that by decree of the king, Lark Nuo is sentenced to hanging today. Her Highness looks with hatred at Thaler, who orders the criminal to be taken away. Finally, the princess turns to the prisoner and barely audibly tells him to wait. Lark notices this and manages to read the girl's words on her lips. Ella still decides to check what is written in the decree, but her brother raises it above her head so that her sister doesn't get it. Waving the paper, the brother leaves, saying that it was all thanks to her. The princess wonders why her brother said that. Ella speculates that a faction of the aristocracy was behind everything originally, and Lark directly reports to the king and protects him. However, with so much information, her head begins to boil. Tyler instructs his servant to follow the princess and see if she has gone to meet someone. At this time, the heroine instructs Emily to go back and find an invitation to dinner, and Aisha follows her. At Sawil's residence, A man is sitting in the garden drinking tea when a servant approaches him, saying that he has guests. A princess came to the sage with a request to discuss one thing. The man looks at the girl and sees that she is covered in sweat. Smiling politely, the man says that it is still early, so he offers to drink a cup of tea. Ella asks the sage to listen to her proposal and says that she is ready to give 30% of the theater's proceeds. Smiling sweetly, the man continues to look at the princess. However, the next moment there is no trace of the smile left, as Alan turns a suspicious glance at the maids. The sage turns away from the princess, walking towards the sofa. The ash-haired man sits on it, spreading his legs wide. The man opens his eyes and, looking at the princess, says without emotion that he is not interested in her proposal. The princess begins to convince Alan, saying that Lark Nuo has a good reputation, and this will raise the authority of the sage. But the man asks why he needs this if he is already quite influential. In addition, Alan says that since the prisoner has a crime against the crown, it will be disadvantageous for him. The man starts to leave because he doesn't want to talk to the princess about the other guy, because she might turn to the king. The girl asks, since when is a king more reliable than a sage? Realizing what the heroine just said, she closes her mouth. The guy grins at the girl's words. Alan turns his head and asks if the princess really thinks so. Ella cautiously responds positively to the man, pressing her hands to her chest. The sage tenderly takes a strand of the princess's hair in his hands, saying that the price for salvation is quite high. Directing his gaze to the girl, he asks her if she is really ready to pay. Realizing that she has no choice, Her Highness smiles brightly, asking what the sage desires. Ella approaches the man's face, clarifying whether he wants money or a specific person. Alan smiles a serpentine smile at the princess's straightforwardness and asks what she can offer him. The main character gently touches the character's lower lip. Then the girl removes her hand from the sage's palm. Ella touches Alan's cheek gently. Bringing her fingers to the man's chin, Her Highness approaches his face, and he widens his eyes in surprise. Alan abruptly moves away from the princess, frightened by such close contact. The girl laughs softly at the man's actions, saying that he refuses to take it even when she offers. Mr. Sage chuckles and says that the princess has again exceeded all his expectations. Simply spreading her arms to the sides, Ella says that she shouldn't fall for the same trick twice. The man sits down and offers to discuss what he can still get in return. There are 40 minutes left before Lark Nuo's execution. He stands on the scaffold, covered in blood and wounded. The man remembers the words of the princess, who asked him to wait. However, the criminal's gaze dims, and he begins to lose hope for the best. Ella frowns and tells the sage that many people guess about their cooperation, and he helps her because he needs her. The girl says that the people love Lark, and therefore his execution could affect her already bad reputation. The sage says that the status of a princess is useful to him, but he will stop cooperation if she constantly causes problems. Ella proudly tells him that she is smart and has a voice before the king. Alan laughs at the heroine's reaction, saying that the princess shouldn't be so boastful. The princess says that only she is suitable for the role of a puppet, since the other brothers do not have the strong authority of their father. The masked man smirks at Ella's words and calls his servant, Felix, to pour the wine. The sage says that he is hurt by the heroine's conversations and great efforts for the sake of another man. Clearing his throat, the man gives instructions to Felix. The servant places a document with a red cover in front of the princess. When the heroine opens it, she sees the word contract and many of its clauses. The girl understands that the sage has deceived her again. Ella turns her gaze to the satisfied man in the mask, who has calculated everything in advance, even preparing the documents. The princess begins to read the document. It says that she must obey the orders of the sage, do everything with his approval. While drinking wine, the man points out that the most important thing is on the last line. Seeing that the last line states that she must appear at the first call, the girl shouts that he is taking advantage of the opportunity. Alan interrupts her and says that she can take her time to think about everything, since the execution site is 25 minutes away. Ella drinks all the wine to the bottom in one go and tells him to give her the pen. The sage smiles triumphantly at the princess's decision. The heroine, with irritation in her voice, tells Alan to go to the execution site while she returns to the palace to find the king. The first prince sits in front of the scaffold, and says that the time has come to hang the criminal. A noose is placed around the bloodied man's neck. The servant is about to turn the lever to the other side to hang Lark Nuo, but someone shouts at them to stop. A crowd of people riding a horse appears from around the corner. Concerned, Tyler screams to pull the lever faster. The servant unquestioningly carries out the prince's order, clicking his handle. The rope flies up, squeezing the former royal general's throat. The sage hurriedly passes by the princess's elder brother. The man simultaneously takes out a sword to throw it towards the prisoner. The blade hits the target and Lark Nuo falls hard to the ground. The horse slows down next to a man whose life a few seconds ago was in the balance. Lark looks at the sage in surprise, not understanding why he is helping him. Alan turns to the first prince, saying that he treats him without respect and judges him without reason. Looking contemptuously at Mo Tyler, he asks him if he understands what problems he now has because of such behavior. Tyler opens his mouth to answer the ashen-haired man's accusations. However, the sage, not interested in the man's justifications, turns away from him. Alan raises his hand and, as an emperor, announces that the execution is cancelled and the case of the accused will be reconsidered. The sage orders the man to be taken back, but the first prince protests indignantly and demands to see the king's order. Ashhair yells at the man that he forgot his place. Enveloping everything around with his serpentine aura, the sage says that even the church cannot challenge his decision. Alan looks askance at the criminal, who is still sitting on the ground, still not realizing that he survived. The sage once again repeats his order to be taken back to prison until a new verdict is announced. Ella stands in her father's office, asking him why he can't give her the prisoner. The king tells her that he has already issued a decree on his hanging, and there is no reason to change it, to which Ella is indignant. His Majesty gets angry and says that Ella has become too capricious lately, although she wasn't so annoying before. The actress has tears in her eyes. She says that she did not do all this for herself. Since the father does not want to help the princess, she decides to demonstratively run away from the office. Waving her hand, she silently begs for the king to stop her. The heroine's guess is confirmed, and her father grabs her hand, telling her to say what she wanted. The princess looks at the king with puppy dog eyes and says that the abolition of the execution is needed specifically for him. Ella says that at first she was offended, so she arrested Lark, but then she thought that her father's rating might fall. The king doubts, because it is not good to go back on your words, but his daughter tells him that no one will think so. The man agrees, but says that everything needs to be checked again for a final decision. The girl is very happy with her father's decision, saying that she loves him very much. The man innocently exhales at the reaction of his daughter, who left the office. The princess happily runs to Aisha to please her with the news that her idol has been pardoned. However, instead of joy, only fear is reflected on the maid's face. She tells the heroine that Mr. Lark Nuo is being tortured. The man is in a poorly consecrated place. Tied with his hands up, the servants brutally beat him. The criminal looks angrily and provokes them to hit him harder. For the words of the former royal general, he gets a whip in the face. The servants laugh and discuss that the princess deliberately appointed a more painful death instead of hanging. The prisoner's gaze begins to dim at the words of the guards, gradually losing hope. However, at the same moment, Her Highness comes into the torture room, plunging everyone into shock. The fire of hope lights up again in the commander's eyes at the sight of the girl. A red-haired servant runs up to Ella and says that they are interrogating a criminal within the framework of the law. The heroine looks at them menacingly, saying that she is their law. Pointing to Lark, the princess says that she will send everyone to the gallows if blood spills from the commander's beautiful body again. The words of Her Highness make the prisoner feel uneasy. Ella blushes at her own words and points out that she meant strength, not beauty, because if he dies, who will defend the kingdom? The princess reports that the king has transferred the Lark Nuo case under her responsibility, to which the servant says that it is still under review. The heroine points to herself, asking the redhead if he thinks she's lying. Very angry, Ella begins to approach him, threatening to punish him for slander. However, the girl is gently stopped by a stranger's hand on her shoulder. Sawile tells the princess that he will be upset if she gets her hands dirty on these people. Her Highness throws off the sage's hand, telling him to talk to the men himself. Suddenly the girl is pierced by the aura of the ash-haired man, and it begins to seem to her that she has already experienced something similar before. Ella pushes these thoughts away from herself, realizing that now there is no time to think about it. The heroine takes the decree from Felix's hands and shows it to the servants, saying that she is in charge of Lark Nuo's business. The guards, with their heads drooping, leave, recognizing the princess's victory. Her Highness tells the men to tell her brother that if he continues to interfere with her, he will greatly regret it. The girl turns towards Adelante's defender and sees him begin to fall to the ground. Realizing that Lark is about to hit the ground hard, the heroine screams helplessly. At this moment, Vale pushes the criminal onto Felix, saving him from falling. Ella scolds the sage for this method of help, to which he replies that he was simply saving her reputation. The hero's conversation is interrupted by a wounded criminal. Lark asks Her Highness the reason she decided to release him. The princess smiles, saying that the man's death will be a great loss for Adelante. The girl says that she has changed her mind about the criminal and is ready to fulfill any demand as compensation. Ella claims that even if Lark Nuo wants to return to the Horse Guards, there will be no problem with that. The man is already opening his mouth to give his answer to the heroine's proposal, but the sage hits him. The princess screams loudly and indignantly at such actions of the ash-haired man. The sage orders Felix to take the criminal to Her Highness's theater. The man turns to the girl, telling her not to worry about Lark and to focus on spending time with him. Vale grabs the princess by the hand, saying that Wow Uden is almost ready, to which she tells him that she had no such plans. The sage turns a sly look at Ella and pronounces the word contract syllable by syllable. The girl resigns herself to her fate and asks to at least let go of her hand, to which she is refused. Lark Nuo hardly opens his eyes and sees in front of him the maids who asked for mercy on him. Feeling heaviness throughout his body, the man takes a sitting position on the bed and thanks the servants for their help. Defender Adelante asks if the girls are servants in the palace, to which he hears that they serve the princess. Lark is very surprised by Emily's words and asks how much his pardon cost her. Aisha tells Mr. Nuo that he can just talk to the princess. The girl says that earlier she also considered Her Highness cruel and evil, but she agreed with the king and the sage to pardon the criminal. Lark reflects on His Majesty's continued neutrality as the two factions fight. Ella enters the room, asking if the former Royal General Adelante has woken up yet. Seeing that the man is awake, the heroine tells him that he can go to his house whenever he wishes. Lark frowns and asks in a loud voice if the princess wants him to leave. Her Highness looks at the hero in bewilderment, not understanding why he is not happy about this news. Ella warns Mr. Nuo that she had to work hard to save him. The heroine looks at the man menacingly, angry that she made so much effort for him. Lark, still not believing, asks the girl if she is letting him go just like that, without asking for anything in return. The former general begins to list what he can do for the princess and who he can become, but Ella stops him. The girl does not have time to say anything as someone hastily enters the room. The theater workers excitedly ask to listen to them and apologize for such a sudden visit. Faya reports that the pub, which recently opened, is taking their customers and completely copying everything they do in the theater, including hiring dancers. The girl gloomily says that these dancers are forced to drink alcohol with the guests, and if necessary, she is also ready to do this. The princess hits Faya on the head, angry at what was said. Ella warns that the purple-haired girl should never dare to stoop to such a level even in her thoughts. After this, the princess pats the girl on the head, saying that she is not bothered by such dirty methods of that beer shop. Her Highness turns to Jack and asks him if he has prepared the tablet as she asked. The young man holds it out, and the princess rejoices at the quality of the work done. Ella says that tomorrow the theater is finally opening after renovation, so they need to put a notice on the gate and hand out flyers. The theater workers are filled with happiness and shout joyfully at the words of their mistress. The princess turns to Lark Nuo, asking if he believes that serving her will keep him safe. Ella smiles sweetly and holds out her palm, asking, in this case, to pay for medicine and accommodation for the days that he spent unconscious. Aisha uneasily says that she is ready to return all the money spent on the former general. The heroine asks the girl to calm down, because a man should not allow women to support him. Lark clutches the sheet, realizing that the princess saved him for another purpose. Defender Adelante asks Her Highness what she wants from him, already preparing for the fact that he will be ordered to kill someone. Ella good-naturedly points to the children, asking Lark to accompany them and help hand out flyers. The man is shocked by the princess's words. First, Prince Adelante sits on the sofa and enjoys the company of spectacular and beautiful girls. The man, who is also enjoying the girl, asks Tyler if he has heard about the theater opening soon. The prince frowns and is clearly not happy about this news, because his sister has not learned her lesson. Ella's older brother returns to the girls, who are standing aside, and says that he wants to try the blonde first, and then the others. On the streets of the city, Jack and the rest of the children address passers-by, inviting them to a new event, Create Your Own Idol. One of the interested people asks to give him a leaflet, but immediately flinches when he notices someone behind Jack's back. The man gets scared and runs away, shouting that he doesn't need any leaflet. The theater director sighs in disappointment, understanding the reason for that person's behavior. Jack turns to Lark Nuo, saying that they are pouring wine nearby and offers to sit there until they finish. With his arms crossed over his chest, Adelante's protector refuses the offer, saying that he promised the princess he would protect them. Jack tells Lark that because of him, people are afraid to take leaflets, so they can carry it until the night. Mr. Nuo asks the blonde man if all the theater workers are former slaves and why they support the royal family. The theater director confidently states that he supports Ella because she is not like other royals. Jack says that the girl gave them not only freedom, but also hope. The young man smiles, saying that under the current rulers, one cannot expect the abolition of slavery. But if a princess becomes the ruler, then a miracle can happen. Lark asks the blonde if he thinks that Her Highness started playing games just to gain their support. Jack says in a loud tone that their few measly lives are not worth such a big deception. The director states that even if the theater is not something serious, it is definitely part of something larger. The young man steps away from the man, telling the children that they will distribute leaflets elsewhere. Blonde warns Mr. Nuo that they will go to the last planned distribution location. Lark watches the departing children warily. The man remembers how, before leaving, he found the princess very quietly saying something to Jack. The defender wonders if Her Highness is now the one who took advantage of people and spread rumors. At the same time, the heroine is walking quickly down the street, trying to break away from the sage. Savale asks Ella why she looks so unhappy, because he is following the agreement. The princess indignantly shouts at him that all this is because he deceived her. The girl says that they accidentally bumped into each other, and Vale suddenly invited her, and according to the contract, she cannot refuse this. The heroine asks the sage, who generally writes in the invitations, "Where you go, so will I." The man chuckles at the princess's reaction and confidently declares that it is he who writes this. Ella realizes that she cannot stop the sage from following her on her heels, but asks not to ruin her plans if it is not a matter of life and death. Vale becomes even more interested in where the girl is going after all. The princess smiles mysteriously and says that she is going to castrate the libertines. The heroine approaches the room in which the first prince is having fun, but one of the servants stops her, asking to see the invitation. Ella covers half her face with a fan and asks the servant if she needs it. The man does not recognize the princess in the heroine and says that if she joins them, she will not need an invitation. Her Highness shouts at the servant not to disturb her and hits him on the leg with her heel. Ella tells the man that she has come to settle an old score. The heroine enters the room and sees in front of her a place that looks like a real brothel. Mo Tyler asks his sister where her manners went. The princess asks her brother exactly the same question, since earlier the prince managed to interfere with the work of her theater and use her name to accuse Lark Nuo. The man retorts to the girl that he learned all this from her. Ella shouts that the prince should not compare her with himself and asks to end this war. The heroine offers a deal. Whoever has the most profit in a month wins, and the loser closes his establishment and does not create problems for his opponent. Tyler replies that he doesn't have time for children's games and asks not to bother him anymore. Expecting such a reaction, Ella grins mysteriously. The princess heads to the exit of the room, simultaneously warning her brother that she gave him a chance. The prince raises his hand, ordering the carriage to be prepared since he needs to go to the shrine. The man smiles, anticipating how he will expose his sister to clean water. Ella goes outside and notices a sage standing nearby. The girl asks Samuel if he is a wizard because he constantly appears out of nowhere and also disappears. The man approaches the heroine and asks her if her offense lies in the fact that he did not go with her to support her. Vale barely audibly asks the princess why she doubts his sincerity. However, Her Highness does not hear this, so the man asks her louder about the further plan of action. Ella smiles insidiously and asks the sage if he knows what the casino owners are most afraid of. The girl begins to smile even more, saying that the answer is the influx of crowds. A few days later, the heroine stands contentedly in His Majesty's office and watches him shout at the first prince. The king throws a book at his son, saying that he expected some great success from him after Ella's criticism. Tyler hastily opens the document, which contains many negative reviews about the place he visited. The first prince shouts that this is slander because the task of his hotel is to entertain aristocrats. The man turns to his sister, saying that the other visitors were slaves who, on the contrary, should be proudly served by the nobility. Ella turns her gaze to the king and sees only his angry and concentrated degeneration of his face. The princess understands that things are bad, since the brothel turned out to be a legal place, but she has a backup plan. The heroine loudly asks whether it is normal to force civilian women to do such work. Her Highness turns to her father, saying that now the girls are afraid to leave their homes, fearing that they will be kidnapped. Tyler yells at his sister to shut up and hand the case over to someone who can handle it. The king interrupts his children's conversations and asks Kaliam to take care of this matter. Smiling contentedly, the third prince gets down on one knee, accepting his father's order. Hearing Tyler begin to resent his father's actions, the king covers his face with his hand, telling everyone to leave. Ella grins and tells her brother that he got himself into trouble. After the audience, the first prince turns to someone asking him to report everything to the master. Tyler smirks that his sister wasn't so stupid. All the theater workers gathered at the Colosseum to celebrate the high income and the large number of their visitors. After the celebration, the princess says goodbye to Jack and Faye. A girl walks down a dark street and shouts loudly that this day is simply wonderful. Back at the palace, the blonde maid runs up to Her Highness and asks why she drank so much. The heroine does not pay attention to the servant's words and reaches out to the girl's cheeks, starting to pinch them. Ella is approached by Lark, who towers menacingly over her and apologizes for taking her away from such an important matter. The princess is frightened by the sudden appearance of Adelante's defender, so she hastily retreats back. The man asks Her Highness in a serious tone if it is true that Mo Tyler was the one who wanted to kill him. Ella whispers to the maid, asking her when Lark arrived and why she wasn't told about it. The princess then awkwardly tells the man that it's late, so they can talk about everything tomorrow. Mr. Nuo grins and tells the main character that if she doesn't want to tell him the truth, then he will ask her brother directly. Hearing this, Ella stops him by grabbing his hand. The girl realizes with horror that Lark is not coming to talk to Tyler, but to take revenge. If the former general went to the first prince now, he would destroy everything for which the princess made great efforts. Ella asks the man to cool down because Mo Tyler's security is just standing there and watching. Lark Nuo suddenly becomes embarrassed, realizing that Her Highness has been touching his hand for too long. Defender Adelante tries to free himself from Ella's grip while she yells at him not to act on emotions. The heroine tells the man that she also wants to take revenge on her brother, so she offers to unite. Without turning his head, Lark asks Her Highness if he can say something. The girl smiles friendly and answers his question positively. Mr. Nuo warns the heroine that even if a man and a woman are reaching for the same object, their hands should not touch. After his words, Ella immediately lets go of the former general's hand and asks what he thinks about her proposal. Lark carefully touches the pads of his fingers to the hand that the princess recently held. Defender Adelante agrees to cooperate with Her Highness, but asks her to explain why she is opposing her brother. Ella realizes that she cannot tell the truth. Why one of the reasons for the death of the state is the man behind the first prince. The princess says that she now has no opportunity to prove her sincerity, so she asks to gain her trust. The man decides to watch the heroine, and if he realizes that she is not going to act, he will take revenge in his own way. Ella asks Lark how he is going to watch her and how he could end up in the palace. The girl does not receive any answers, as the former general silently leaves the room. The next day, King Adelante asks Lark Nuo if he is sure of his decision not to return to the royal guard. To this, Adelante's defender replies that he acts consciously. However, the man tells His Majesty that he has one more request: to become Princess Ella's guardian knight. The heroine is very surprised by the words of Lark Nuo, since the guardian knight protects from all kinds of dangers and serves only one person. Savail looks at the man with contempt, as this position allows a man to enter the girl's bedroom at any time. After some time, Ella walks through the palace grounds, but there is no hint of a good mood on her face. The girl turns to someone and yells at him not to follow her around. Lark confidently replies that since he has already taken an oath, he will soon be responsible for the safety of Her Highness. The princess says that since the man does not want to serve her father, she will assign him to the theater as a security captain. Mr. Nuo remains as unshakable and convinced that he must protect Ella. Seeing that Lark is not going to listen to her, the heroine resigns herself and tells him to do as he wants. The girl finally looks the guardian knight straight in the eye and notices something. The defender of Adelante looks intently at the princess. The heroine finds such a look strange. The man asks Ella's opinion that a person's feelings for another can change dramatically. Her Highness looks away and awkwardly asks not to change the topic of conversation. Having not heard a clear answer, Lark reaches out his hand to the girl's hair and lightly touches the hair. However, his hand is immediately stopped by someone else's. Savail annoyedly tells the man that he has not yet learned the ethics of chivalry. The sage says that he is amazed at how quickly and successfully the princess creates a harem for herself. Lark Nuo removes his hand from his grip and bows before Ella, saying that he will accept any punishment. The girl warns the former general that they will talk later, since the sage clearly came for a reason. Finally, the guardian knight looks at Savail with contempt and then leaves. Ella exhales and thanks the sage for coming on time, since he has no idea where this could have gone. Ash-haired grins and says that he still came at the wrong time. The princess smiles awkwardly and says that there is nothing between her and Lark other than a working relationship. Her Highness clarifies the reason for the sage's arrival and says that she also needs to discuss something related to Lark Nuo. Suddenly, Vale yells at the heroine not to talk about the other man next to him. The sage quickly approaches the princess and asks if she and the former general are the same in her eyes. Ella begins to get angry at the ash-haired man, since he began to cross all boundaries with such behavior. The princess pushes the sage away and shouts that they are the same because they both do and say strange things. The heroine turns away, shouting that if she didn't have to survive, she wouldn't care about anyone. Realizing that the girl is leaving, the man will hug the girl, causing her to lose her balance. Her Highness is angry at such actions, so she intends to slap Vale, but accidentally touches the mask. The mask falls to the ground, and a bleeding wound appears on the sage's face. The heroine's eyes widen in surprise, and she looks at the man in disbelief. The girl faces her only close friend, Alan. Ella looks at the man with despair in her eyes, not understanding what is happening. The heroine thinks that she opened up too much to Alan and behaved completely differently with the sage. All the moments associated with the ash-haired one flash through the princess's head. The heroine experiences a trembling that spreads throughout her body. Alan notices this and tries to take the girl's hand, but she yells at him not to come closer. Smiling friendly, the sage raises his hands and says that there is no need to be afraid of him because they are allies. Ella crosses her arms over her chest, saying that she doesn't understand what the man is talking about. Alan says that he did not want to deceive the princess because he was sure that she recognized him. To confirm his words, the sage puts his hand on his heart and swears to God that he will never betray the heroine. Her Highness examines Savail carefully, noticing every detail in his appearance. The princess looks down and says that she doesn't care about the man's words. The girl tries to leave again, but the sage grabs her hand. Alan tells the heroine that he will win her trust again and asks not to give it to anyone for now. While all the theater actors are preparing for their performance, the princess sits alone and depressed away from everyone. Faya approaches her mistress and asks what she is thinking about. Her Highness sighs and begins to talk about one of her friends. However, Ella does not finish, asking the girl with purple hair to return to the stage. The heroine throws her head up, thinking that she definitely won't fall for the loud promises made by Savail. Now the girl's puzzle is coming together, because the sage and Alan were similar in appearance, but differed in character. Ella's eyes fill with disappointment at the thought that the ash-haired man wanted to get close to her in order to kill her. The princess slaps herself on the cheeks, driving away dark thoughts, because the future, like their relationship, could change. Her Highness replays in her head the man's words about how he will win her trust again. The heroine begins to hit herself even harder on the cheeks, trying to convince herself that appearances can be deceiving. A maid approaches the girl, asking if the princess is feeling well. Ella smiles friendly, saying that she was just fighting off insects. The maid reports that His Majesty has ordered Her Highness to return to the palace to discuss something related to the International Congress. The heroine enters the office where the royal family, a sage and a man in a robe, have gathered. Ella notices that the atmosphere in the room is saturated with gloom and tension. The messenger of God, Tarian Hui, looks at the princess carefully and smiles. Her Highness notices that the man is wearing a white robe, which means he is a cleric. Next, the heroine's gaze turns to the sage, who smiles sweetly at her. Ella turns her head away from Alan because she thinks that he knew something about this meeting, but did not tell her anything. His Majesty informs everyone that in half a month their country will host the World Congress, so he wants to hear some proposals on this matter. However, there is still dead silence in the office. Then the king decides to find out the opinion of the sage, to which he simply asks to give him some assignment. The commander of the knightly detachment, Corporal Lars, also asks His Majesty to give him some task. Hiram Adelante rubs the bridge of his nose, disappointed by the men's answers. The king asks the divine messenger if he has any suggestions. Tarian Hui replies that he listened to the Enlightenment priest and believes that the princes will be able to complete the matter. At this moment, Tyler tells His Majesty that the third prince will definitely be able to cope with this difficult task. Kaliam reproaches his brother for lying, but the first prince claims that state affairs are no joke, so he will do a better job with this matter. Happy Liam stands up and asks the king to grant him this task, and the envoy confirms that the Holy See will cooperate with the third prince. The Congress held once in a decade is the best platform to demonstrate the strength of a nation. Ella asks Lark Nuo how a country can demonstrate its power. The Guardian Knight replies that the aspects of the demonstration are chosen by the host country, and each other will bring its capable people to the conference. The princess understands that the host country has the advantage of lengthy preparation, but this time their country was chosen only half a month before the event. The girl thinks that her older brother is plotting again. Even the Holy Throne intervened, so the assembly this time will not be simple. In the book that the heroine read in her world, there was no record of the General Congress, so too much could change due to her intervention. Lark notices the confusion on Ella's face, so he extends his hand to her to reassure her. The silence is interrupted by the sage, who silently entered the room and carefully observed Mr. Nuo's behavior. The man mockingly asks the heroes if he interfered with them. The princess asks the ash-haired man for what purpose he came, to which Alan replies that he came to dispel the girl's doubts. The sage approaches the heroine and says that he has good news. Savale approaches the princess's face and congratulates her on getting married. At the same time, a dark-skinned man is riding in the desert, looking forward to meeting his beautiful bride. Ella yells at Alan to stop making jokes like that. The man takes out a black envelope, saying that the preparations were carried out in secret and everything has already been decided. Her Highness tries to take the envelope from the sage, but he does not allow this, taking the envelope to the side. The heroine is angry at Alan's action and rises from her seat to snatch the letter. The ash-haired man grins and puts his arm around the girl's waist. Ella is not surprised by this action of Savale and breaks into a sly smile. A clicking sound is heard in the room. Lark Nuo immediately takes the black envelope from the sage's fingers. The heroine grins, playfully telling Alan that her assistants were behind him all this time. The man approaches the girl's ear and whispers to her that he never thought that she would be in his arms. Finally, Ella's mind clears and she pushes the sage away from her. The princess's face turns red from the realization that the beauty of the ash-haired man has clouded her consciousness. The heroine extends her hand to Lark, ordering him to give her a secret order. The order states that it is now necessary to form an alliance with the state of Cpia in order to stop possible hostility on their part. Ella crumples the paper out of anger, realizing that in politics there is no peace or friendship because there is only profit. Alan says he has more news, but this time it's bad. Seeing that the good news for the sage is heavy artillery, the heroine hopefully asks what the bad news is, hoping that it will calm her down. Vale informs the girl that she needs to meet with the Prince of Cpia, and if nothing happened, then the messengers are already at the gate. Ella puts on a straight face, realizing that this is really bad news. One of the attendants asks His Highness if he needs to change before going down. Hiding behind snow-white tulle, the man replies that this is not necessary. The prince threateningly asks the messenger if he dares to order him, after which the servant falls to his knees, asking for mercy. The next moment, the resident of Cpia falls to the ground dead. People watching this scene are amazed at how the prince of another state decided to demonstrate his power. The nobility discusses the fact that previously similar scenes could be observed among them, but at some point this stopped. Hearing such conversations, the heroine begins to get angry. The ambassador announces that His Highness, the third prince of the kingdom of Cpia, has arrived. People call the ambassador arrogant, to which he asks them if they are unhappy with something. There's a cry from the princess's carriage that she is really not happy with something. Ella comes down the steps and says that she is very unhappy with such a groom. The heroine looks mockingly at the man, telling him to go back where they came from. The third prince of Cpia passes his greedy gaze over the girl. After her words, the princess quickly returns to her carriage. Lark pulls the reins towards himself, forcing the horses to move quickly. The prince is not far behind and forces his elephant to follow Ella's carriage. However, such actions are stopped by the Knights of Adelante, surrounding the man from all sides. The sage asks His Highness Tariq to follow him into the city if he does not intend to leave the palace grounds. Alan warns the man that he will need to put in some effort to obtain the promised treasure. Seeing that the Adelante Knights are not going to let him pass further, Tariq orders his animal to step into the city. The sage returns to his residence, hurriedly heading somewhere. Ella asks Savoil if everything has been resolved, and when she receives a positive answer, she calls the maid to her. Realizing why the princess called her, the man gestures for the maid not to do anything. Ash-haired approaches the heroine and begins to remove heavy jewelry from her. The girl says that she is lucky that such a smart man serves her. Ella argues that the prince of the Cpia state is quite cruel. The sage says that His Highness is not as stupid as he seems. The princess thinks that since it was her older brother who insisted that she get married, then she is interfering with him. The heroine throws her head up and reminds the sage that he is helping her with this marriage, and she is helping Ka Liam with the Congress. Alan says that everything is going according to plan, and he would not have allowed the wedding to happen anyway, even if Ella herself wanted it. The people gathered in front of the Colosseum with excitement are discussing today's premiere, which is about to take place. Suddenly, an elephant appears in front of the people, roaring at them. However, the townspeople do not pay much attention to the animal and continue to discuss the theatrical performance. Tariq asks his elephant Ponpon why the people are not running away from them. Then the prince decides to show how ruthless he is and gives the command to the elephant to attack. When an animal swings its trunk at people, it encounters an obstacle in the form of a shield in front of it. It was the Knights of Adelante who once again stopped His Highness's attack. Corporal Lars warns Prince Tariq that although he is an honored guest in their country, he has no right to take the lives of the people of Adelante. The man shouts to the commander of the knightly detachment that they do not dare attack Ponpon. The prince's attention turns to the blonde young man who calls His Highness. Jack tells Tariq that the princess has prepared a place of honor for him and is awaiting his arrival. Earlier, the prince's suitor told the man about the success of the theater and about the tickets that allow him to shake hands with his idol. Tariq was then surprised that such tickets cost a lot of money and asked the servant why not buy the girls as mistresses. The respondent responded that the workers carefully follow the theater rules of not having personal contact with fans. The third prince knows that sometimes the princess herself participates in performances, so he joyfully shouts that he is ready to meet his bride. Tariq gets off his vehicle and walks towards the theater entrance, thinking that he underestimated Ella. Behind him, the man hears theater-goers discussing how their beautiful princess is forced to marry such a cruel man. A girl of charming beauty appears on the stage. She moves gracefully and gracefully, attracting all eyes. His Highness Tariq also looks at his bride in fascination throughout the performance. After a while, the heroine is already sitting in her dressing room, taking off her jewelry, and suddenly Prince Cpia begins to break into the room. Her Highness's maid tried to stop Tariq, but the man didn't care about her words. Ella asks the groom if there is any etiquette in his country according to which it is customary to break into a woman's room. The prince begins to approach the girl, asking her if she is still angry. However, a guardian knight appears on Tariq's path and does not intend to let the man get any closer than he needs. His Highness is annoyed by Lark Nuo's actions and angrily shouts at him to move away. Ella tells her fiancé in a raised voice that he crossed the line when he tried to beat up her friends outside her house. Tariq peeks out from behind the former general and happily asks if the bride wants to talk to him. The heroine gives a sign to Lark and warns the prince that she does not agree with their engagement, so he can leave. Tariq grins, looking at the knight who let him through, and says that the marriage does not depend on Ella. The princess answers the groom that since this is so, he can marry her without her consent. The third prince tells the girl that before meeting her, he had bad intentions towards her, but now he will treat her as his wife. The man runs his hand over the heroine's cheek, saying that political marriage is her destiny. The girl's gaze dims when Tariq says that she should be glad that she at least has a beautiful face. His Highness warns that the marriage decision will not change, but he would prefer that Ella marry him of her own free will. Seeing that the princess became sad because of his words, the man grins and hugs her. However, her Highness pushes the groom's hand away, telling him to stop. Ella says that the prince is right, but she wants to make sure he is sincere, otherwise he will only get a cold corpse. Prince Cpia asks the bride to tell her in more detail, but he himself thinks that the girl is naive and a spoiled dummy. The heroine says that she has 3 conditions. The first is not to disturb the order in the city during the Congress. The second is that her groom must become the absolute champion during the convention. And the very last condition is that the man must tell who planned this marriage. When the prince finally leaves, Ella exhales, saying that just a little more, and she would not have been able to hold back. The sage enters the room through the window, saying that the girl looks like she handled everything with ease. Alan takes a snow-white handkerchief from his pocket and begins to wipe the princess's shoulder. From the memory that Tariq touched the girl, the ash-haired man begins to irritably wipe the heroine's entire body. Ella pushes the sage's hand away, asking what he's doing now. The man's face is becoming darker and darker with each passing second. Noticing this, the princess anxiously asks Sawile if everything is okay with him. The man barely audibly says that he is very sorry. The sage still says something barely audible, but Ella doesn't hear any of it and asks to be a little louder. Sawile angrily says that the girl threw herself into the arms of the third prince and did not take her eyes off him, which was untidy to watch. The heroine incomprehensibly says that Alan himself mentioned a trap where she was used as bait. The sage loudly says that the first part of the plan is completed, and now Ella needs to stay away from Tariq. Now the girl is the key to finding evidence of betrayal by the people behind Prince Cpia. Sawile says in a serious tone that the marriage contract must be validly terminated. The heroine chuckles evilly, saying to leave it to her. The princess confidently says that she will not allow her fiancé to win any competition. After some time, all the participants of the Congress had already gathered in the temple of the deity. The corporal approaches His Majesty and reports that all representatives, with the exception of the Luyang state, have arrived. Tariq is heard shouting, who irritably asks the king how long they still have to wait to start. Considering such a tone to be beyond the bounds of decency, Hiram Adelante intends to stop it. However, the third prince of Cpia and his ambassadors stare at the man menacingly, awaiting his next actions. The king shudders and remains silent, unable to say anything else due to fear. Hiram orders the commander of the knightly detachment to begin. The host of the event thanks everyone for visiting and reminds them that the Congress is a testament to the friendship of the allies. The sage rises from his seat, saying that he will begin to kickstart the discussion. 12 girls with musical instruments begin to climb the stairs. Vale asks the convention participants to name them correctly, and the one with the most correct answers wins. All the assembled spectators begin to excitedly discuss the first test for the participants. The sage quietly gives Ella a thumbs up, approving her idea. Tariq orders the servant to go to the Lopu state delegation and convey that he must definitely win. Prince Cpia notices that these instruments are from that mysterious eastern country. The heroine looks with suspicion at the strange behavior of her fiancé, not understanding why he looks so self-confident. Most of these tools are nowhere to be found now, and unless there are time travelers on the side, it is impossible to recognize them all. Her Highness looks intently at the Cpia state answer sheet and notices that they have one more instrument than Lopu. Cpia's envoys ask Ella why she looks so surprised. The princess says that she simply did not expect that everything in Cpia would be so bad, because they only guessed 8 instruments. Tariq says that a victory is a victory, no matter what the result. The heroine asks the groom why he considers himself the winner.